Okay, so I always say let's begin at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Highbury in London.
Mm.
And I moved from there at the age of 2
Mm.
when my parents went to Muswell Hill in North London.
Mm. Were you a large family?
You mean my
Brothers and sisters?
brothers and sisters. I had one brother and one sister.
Yeah. And your parents, had they lived in Highbury for long? Do you know much about their background, their early background?
I don't think so. Shall I talk about my father first?
Yes, I'd be interested.
My father came from Russia.
Mm.
He was born and lived in Borisov, which is in the area of Minsk, I believe. His parents were publicans, that's to say they kept an inn. And he studied in a yeshiva, and he was quite learned in these matters, although I don't think he really took it seriously. In fact, I think he rather reacted to it in his later days. He always used to say that he thought the arrangements that were made by the Almighty were somewhat lacking as he grew older. But he was learned, and it was thought that he would go into the ministry of some sort. But instead, he came over to England in his youth. He was probably in his teens. It is a little difficult to get exact ages.
Yeah. Do you know what year it was he came?
I don't know what year it was.
No.
He was probably about 14 or 15, I think.
They couldn't speak any English, presumably.
He couldn't speak any English, and he came over here and had to take menial work. That is to say, he used to sell chocolates on the beach. He used to mend windows. He had a barrow in the market.
Yeah.
I can show you a picture of him shortly.
Yes, after I'd like to see that.
He was shorter than me, at least I think so.
Yes.
And if anybody wanted to put their barrow in the place where his barrow was, he used to fire up no end.
Yes. But how did they find accommodation when they first came? I mean, a young man like that, where would he live?
He came over, he made the journey with a lady. I don't know anything about her, but she accompanied him. And I think he just found his way into the Jewish community, and I think he just went into one of these lodging houses that were available in those days in the East End.
Yes. So where did he meet your mother?
I don't know. I better talk to you about my mother then. My mother, on the contrary, comes from a family who have been established in England for more than one generation. Her father was born in England, and I think her mother was too. In fact, at one time they were quite well off. They lived in a street which I believe was called Cambridge Gardens, and they had a pair of horses and a carriage. I think that my father made his appearance, and all I know is that they liked the appearance of the lining of his coat.
That's lovely.
And he was thought to be an eligible person.
Yes. Well, he must have made his way in the world by then.
Yes. From doing the things that I've told you about before, he somehow got into rubber soles and heels. He used to buy them have them made for him from a fire factory, and he had premises in Houndsditch. I remember in my young days when I went to these premises, they smelt very strongly everywhere of rubber.
Yes.
There were several stories. The things that I used to remember were the enormous cart horses that were down there. There were lots of manure and drinking troughs and things of that sort. And all down the street there were Jewish people with wholesale and retail premises, and my father seemed to know most of them. And he used to take me to the Central Hotel in Aldgate, where I used to have dishes that were not known at home, like the Jewish dishes were like the sweet carrots, which we seem to have more English food than mine.
Through your mother, obviously,
Through my
yes.
mother's tradition.
Mm.
Mind you, we had plenty of chicken and chicken soup, but we didn't have latkes and things of that sort.
But they kept an Orthodox home from the dietary point of view.
I would say, I have to admit that my mother was never very orthodox from the kosher point of view.
And your father didn't object?
My father didn't object at all. He was never terribly keen on that.
So he didn't continue with his studying really at all?
He didn't continue with his study. As I remember things, and I have to confess this, when we had Pesach, he used to go through it. His main object seemed to be to get through everything at the highest possible speed. I have never heard some of the songs sung at such speed.
Yes, yes. Yes, oh, I'm sure. So, you and your family, they moved from Highbury to, where did you say they moved to?
Muswell Hill.
Muswell Hill. And what sort of home did you have there?
We had a house there. It was quite a pleasant house. As a matter of fact, Evelyn and I went up to have a look at it some years ago.
Yes.
And it struck me as being a better house than I had remembered it.
Yes. Was it a 3-story or?
No, only a 2-story house. Yes.
Did Mother have help?
Yes, my mother had an old retainer who was a sort of, she wasn't really a nanny because my mother always looked after us children, but she helped in every possible way.
Yes.
I think she was bullied a bit as well.
Yeah, yes. So did you go to school locally?
I went to school locally, yes.
Do you remember?
Kindergarten.
Yeah, do you remember anything about that?
I remember going to school in a pushchair when I was 6.
Yes. Oh my goodness, that was a bit old.
It was a bit old, yes. But
yes.
I was very much mollycoddled, but nevertheless, people did that sort of thing in those days.
Well, you were the
more
youngest?
than they do now. No, I was the eldest.
Oh, so even then, you were still...
Yeah. And I went to this establishment, which I remember was called Norfolk House High School, which was only really round the corner from us. And I managed to get into Highgate School, which was a public school.
Yes.
But we had a good deal of trouble there because the headmaster refused to let us take off the Jewish holidays, even the high holidays.
What sort of year would this have been? Do you remember?
Now let me think. I think you better turn that off for a minute whilst I think. I think it must have been in 1924.
Yes.
I was 9 at the time.
Yes.
My mother and father went to see the headmaster. We took this up with the Board of Deputies and all sorts of things, but the man was adamant. So after I'd been there for a very short time, less than a fortnight I think, I was taken away and they managed to get me into Merchant Taylor's School.
And where was that situated?
That was then situated in the city, in Carthusian Street I believe it was, or near there. My father used to travel from Muswell Hill by the train to Houndsditch every morning, so he was able to go with me to near the school, and then I got off and went the rest of the way.
Was there not quite a large Jewish population going to, of boys going to Highgate?
At that time, not. Things altered, I think, after that particular headmaster left.
Yes, yes. Did your parents take you to synagogue?
Yes, I remember going with my father to the great synagogue in the East End.
What was that like?
Oh, that was very, well, to me at that time, it was very large and almost overpowering. And they had extremely good cousins. And I didn't go there very often. This was only on occasion.
Did you go to have any religious education?
Oh yes, I had a bar mitzvah. I was in Ealing at that time. We moved to Ealing when I was 11.
Yes.
In 1926. And my bar mitzvah was in 1928. I had a Hebrew teacher who taught me privately in Muswell Hill. It started in Muswell Hill. and he didn't think I could do an awful lot, so I didn't do the Haftarah. But when I got to Ealing, my brother was beginning to be taught by the Reverend Berman, who was the rabbi at Wembley Synagogue.
Right.
Later,
Mm.
but at that
Mm.
time he was removed.
Mm.
He was the brother-in-law of our minister in Ealing.
I see.
And he eventually taught me to do the Haftarah and the whole lot.
Mm.
So I have had a little
Yes.
education of a sort. Not very advanced, but
no.
of a sort.
And so you were allowed to take off High Holy Days and festivals at,
Oh,
when
yes.
you were at Merchant Taylor's?
Yes, I was,
Mm.
but I wasn't at Merchant Taylor's all that length of time because, as you will remember, I went to Highgate when I was about 9, and I left Merchant Taylor's when I was about 11, and I then went to College Court in Hammersmith, which is St Paul's Junior School,
Yes.
and I followed on from there. I got a scholarship to St Paul's, and I went to St Paul's after that, and I went to the Evening Synagogue. Not very often, mostly, I'm afraid, during the High Holy Days.
But you had no, you had plenty of support from St Paul's, did you, for
Oh yes,
continuing?
my goodness! I remember the day when I first went in, into the maths class at the junior school. There was a boy there who was Jewish, and he welcomed me, and he was talking about don't take any notice of all these trifle-faces. I remember him saying that they used to have, the gym was set apart
Yeah.
for non-Christian people.
Yes,
Mostly they were Jewish. And in St Paul's itself, the art school was set apart, and there were crowds of them.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
it was a totally different atmosphere.
Yes.
I didn't like it at Merchant Taylor's. I felt oppressed there because
Yes.
there were very few Jewish people and
Yes.
I didn't understand them.
No.
But it was totally different at St Paul's, both in the prep school and in the senior school.
That was really good, wasn't it?
Yes.
It made a difference, adapt to your education.
It made an enormous difference.
So how long did you stay at St Paul's?
I only stayed there until I passed my school certificate, which I did when I was 15. And I then went into my father's business.
Which had no doubt expanded quite a lot.
Oh yes. In 1919 my father started a factory down in North Acton.
Was your father at home during the First World War? Or was he able to?
He was
Stay
at
in the
home.
business?
At one time he was marching around with a view to being a soldier, but like me, he would have been the worst possible of soldiers. We would really have been on our last legs if he had to go.
So 1919 you went into his business.
Oh no, it wasn't in 1990. When I left school.
Oh yes,
which-
sorry, we
which
got the
would
dates
have
wrong there.
been in the, let me see, how old would I have been then? If I was 15, it would be in 1930.
1930. I'm sorry, we must have mentioned 1919
I
just
did, that's
before.
when he started his factory.
Oh yes, yes. Sorry. So 1930 you went.
By that time it had expanded quite
Yes,
considerably.
yes, yes.
But I remember in that factory that they used to use ground up solid bus tyres to put in the rubber soles and wheels, so you can tell how long ago it was and how times have changed since that
Absolutely,
first happened. I can remember the open double-decker buses with the open deck on the top, and they used solid tyres, no pneumatic tyres in those days.
So you learned that business right from the start. And
Right
you
from
had
the
to show
start,
you.
and I went right through.
Did you have a lot of employees?
In the end, we had about 250 employees, and it was quite highly capitalised as well because it's very large machinery used in the rubber industry. I mean, 500 and 600 horsepower motors, for example, and enormous mixing machines that went through into the first floor. The man stood on more or less just under the first floor, and the materials were delivered to him on the first floor. He put them in the machine and they got mixed up. It's something like a food processor. They were mixed up, only very much larger.
Did you have to have people with any scientific knowledge?
In the laboratory, yes. we had about 8 or 9 people in the laboratory at one time. And this went on till... Oh, the name of the company was the Sussex Rubber Company. I don't know. I don't want to go away from here without showing
Well,
you
we'll have a
something.
look after. Yes, I'll make a note of it, so we'll come back to that.
I've got one of their reports.
Yes, that's
there.
very interesting. So what sort of social life were you having at this time when you were a young man then?
I didn't have a very good social life because I was overprotected and I used to retreat into my shell far too much. I used to read a lot. And this was not a good thing.
No.
We never went to the YI at evening school. We knew a few people.
That's the youth there.
Yes, Young Israel.
Young Israel, yes.
My father was the treasurer of the synagogue for a time. When we first arrived there in 1926, they roped him in. They made him treasurer because I think they wanted a subscription. But there is, or was, in the evening synagogue, a marble plaque, something like a tombstone, I would say, on which the subscriptions of the people for the building fund are all set out, which is the most dreadful thing to my mind.
Yes.
At the top, the amount given was £105, 100 guineas, which was quite a lot of money in those days.
Of course.
Because this was in about 1926, 27.
Yes. So you didn't have very much social life, so your work was mostly, your days were spent mostly going to work and coming home in the evening.
That's right, yes.
So let's say from 1930, we're going on to the start of the war, 1939.
Yes,
Anything
well,
special
really
happened?
all through the war and really until 1966.
Well, where were you? Well, I'm not quite sure what age you would have been in 1939.
I was in my 20s.
So what did you do then?
I didn't do any very warlike activities. I continued to work in the business. They didn't accept me. I wasn't, in their opinion, in a sufficiently good grade to be accepted. And as I say, like my father, I think that if they'd had to depend on me, they'd have been in really worse straits than they were.
But they didn't send you to any factory work, or was your factory taken over for?
No, our factory was doing useful work.
Otherwise, no doubt, you would have had to have gone.
I expect so, yeah.
So what effect did the war have on you and your family?
I don't think it had a tremendous effect, except that we didn't like it very much. But I don't suppose anybody else did either. Although not most people, some people I believe might have enjoyed it, but
Your brother?
he didn't. My brother was in the same position as me.
He was also in the business?
Yes.
In the family business?
Yes. There were too many of us in the business, which was the trouble. I've always thought that it would have been much better if I hadn't at such an early age gone into business than if I'd gone elsewhere and picked up some knowledge which I could have brought to the business.
That is a more modern way of thinking, isn't it?
Yes. I've always felt also that it is not right for a family to have all its members in the same business.
So did you continue living at home all this time?
Yes, this is what was done. I mean,
Yes, I understand that.
Yes, but when our eldest son decided he was going to leave home, we were very surprised. But we realised that this was now the done thing.
This is why this oral history, just one little example, is interesting, because this is of a time that people didn't leave home until they got married.
That's
Otherwise
right.
the parents would have felt, what's wrong with the home that we're giving you?
Yes.
Yes. So what did happen? You met Evelyn at some stage, no doubt?
I met Evelyn at some stage, yes. She was only just down the road, actually. And I met her, and we went out. We went out on September the 17th, 1948. That's right. That was the first time I was out. And we usually go out and celebrate that day.
Very nice too. Very nice.
And we got engaged on December the 12th of that same year. That's right, isn't it?
So you didn't waste a lot of time then having...
No.
No? Good.
Her father didn't want to get us to get married until the following December, I think. But we managed, and my parents helped.
She's disagreeing with that.
Have I got it all wrong? Well, you have to tell.
So when did you actually get married?
We were married in June 1949.
Were you the first one to leave the nest?
I was.
Did that cause any feelings or...
Well, I suppose it must have. I suppose it was a time before we then got accepted, as it were, as a member of the family.
But where did you go to live when you first
We
got
went
married?
to live in Carberry Avenue, Acton.
Mm.
Not awfully far from Acton Town Station, off of Gunnersbury.
Yeah, and you could still get to Houndsditch quite easily from there.
We were not in Houndsditch, so that we completely moved away from Houndsditch to North Acton at that time.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. You moved
My father started the factory. I'm sorry I haven't explained it properly. My father started the factory in North Acton in 1919, and in the 20s he brought the offices over there and shut down Houndsditch.
I see.
So we were then located in northwest London, and it was then that we moved to Ealing, because it was obviously nearer the Mug Royal.
Yes, of course, of course. So what sort of house did you two start with?
We started with I think it had 4 bedrooms, yes, it must have had. It was a detached house. It cost us about £5,000, I think. Which again was a lot of money in those days. This is in
What year?
1949.
I would have thought that was quite a lot of
It
money.
was quite a lot of money in 1949.
Mm.
The company, I'm sorry I don't tell this very consecutively,
No, it's
but
fine.
it's sort of borne in upon me as to how we could manage to do it. But in 1947, the company became a public company, and it was only a small public company. I didn't really want it to become one, but my father was persuaded, and I thought we were too small. And thereby, each member of the family got a certain amount of cash, which we used in the main to buy a house.
Buy a house, yes.
It was very useful.
Of course.
And that is how we managed to find that money. And we stayed there until, I think it was, tell me if I'm wrong, 1966, wasn't it? From 1949 to 1966. 64. 64.
Yeah.
Yeah, 64.
Did you have any family then?
Yes. All our children were not born there, but they were born at the time when we were there.
Did you keep a religious name at all? Did you
Well,
send them to religion school or keep the festivals?
they all went to religion school at Ealing Synagogue. Oh, certainly they did that. We didn't keep a kosher home in the sense that we weren't extremely religious, but we didn't have any bacon or ham or any of the things.
But you remained in the Orthodox synagogue?
Yes. I didn't want to be in an Orthodox synagogue. I am, I think, probably amongst the most left-wing of the members of our synagogue. And I have always been so. But Evelyn's family, even came, were all in Evelyn. She had a large number of uncles and aunts, and all her friends and acquaintances were in Ealing, in the Orthodox synagogue, and they had been founder members of the Orthodox synagogue. So that's where we were members.
Yes, it would have been difficult for you to have broken away.
Yes, and we were members there all the time after we had moved to our first house in Harrow in 1964. And we stayed in that particular house until the end of 1973.
And then did you...
And we were still members of the Evening Synagogue. Then we moved to a different house in Harrow. And we were only there for, was it 4 years?
5 years.
5 years.
Children, meanwhile, had grown up, presumably?
Yes. We had our 25th anniversary at this other house in Harrow. And then we moved over here when the children, when the last of our boys got married.
And you were still continuing working in the family business all this time?
In 1966, the family business was sold to a large group. The rubber sole and heel industry was, our factory was very specialised. And developments have taken place whereby shoe manufacturers, who by this time have become our main customers, as distinct from shoe repairers, which we started. There used to be a shoe repair around every corner, but they became quite a distinct, almost an extinct species. We had to get out of this business in the end, because shoe manufacturers were beginning to mould soles and heels onto footwear themselves. There were so many developments that, because we were, I think now, with hindsight, over-specialised, I was instrumental, really, in getting out of this business.
Were you sort of nearing retiring age at that time?
No, this was the unfortunate part about it. I was about 51 and my brother was about 49. And it was a very difficult time. It was not a good time to change businesses. But if we hadn't done it, we would have been much worse off than happily we are.
Did you work after that?
Oh yes, I thought somehow that it was morally depraved to do anything other than go into manufacturing. So I went eventually, after quite a lot of thought, into a business. I bought a business that made bags of various sorts, not handbags, school satchels, bags for musical instruments, covers for musical instruments, and things of that sort.
Did you have any outside interests outside your business? Or did you play any active part in any voluntary organisation?
I regret to say that I've always been rather lacking in that sort of thing, and I feel that. The most I have done is to give to charitable organisations, but I have not taken part in them myself, which is a bad mark to me.
What made you decide to come and join a liberal synagogue?
Well, it wasn't what decided me, because was already decided many years before. It was the question of persuading Eva.
Yes.
And we had a sort of shoe crawl. In which we went to and fro from various synagogues, and eventually we decided that we liked the Northwood one. And I am certainly not sorry, and I don't think that Evelyn is now sorry. I think she likes our service.
Yes.
I've always liked the idea that I could sit next to my wife and not some person that I didn't know very well, because I happened to have a seat that belonged to my father or something of that sort.
Yes, I think that's a very important point. Well, I think that's very interesting. I don't know whether you feel there are any other things that you'd like to say that might be of interest to posterity.
I don't, unfortunately, think that my life is going to be of all that interest to posterity.
But I mean, when you think about it, when you talk about how your father started, I mean.
Oh yes, I think that was quite
amazing, isn't it? How somebody learns the language and sets up in business.
Yes.
And nowadays they say you can't do this, that, and the other unless you've got a degree or had experience. And
my father,
that generation.
My father, towards the end of his life, discovered that he could make speeches, and he used to go on at great length, both in business and out of business, in which he would explain to people how hard times were, how there were no national health service or anything of that sort. There was no unemployment benefit. If you didn't make good, you were just done for.
That's right. And young people today would find that very interesting, but very different. Difficult to understand. Well, I think that's very interesting. I'd like to look at some of your photographs and other material that you have. And thank you very much for giving us the time.